F sharp, A sharp, Revisited.
Hello everyone and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we talk about music and occasionally have a guest. We have Adam. Say hi, Adam.
Hello, I'm Adam.
And we also have Nick, who I forgot to make a nickname for this time. Sorry about that, Nick.
I'm not ever going to forgive you for this.
Yeah, I know, but I'm still a music...
You know how much you love Björk? Guess who's getting a terrible review today?
Yes, our first review is for Björk's new album, Utopia, and I am a huge Björk fan. I'm a huge fan of specifically her first 4 albums. Then I think she went a little bit kind of wavy with Medulla Fruta Biophilia, but then in 2015 she released what I think is one of her best albums in Vulnicura. It's just such an amazing, devastating breakup album that I was quite anxious to see what she would come out with this album, whether she would continue this upward trend, I should say. And before we get into it, I've got her album cover right here. Would either of you care to describe it for the listeners?
It looks like Adam. Oh!
It's like someone took parts of a butterfly and glued them to their face and then splashed paint on themselves.
It's very... it looks like there's a vagina on her forehead.
Yeah, that's probably a better way of describing it.
This is true. Like on her last album, she had a vagina on her chest, but now it's on her forehead. I don't know if that means
it's
something.
rising up her body. It's showing that originally she was doing lyrics from the heart about sex, and now she's doing lyrics from the brain about sex.
I kind of wish that matched the album, but yeah. So I thought, yeah, quite an interesting album cover.
Generally don't much care for Björk's album covers. They're a bit...
I personally love the one for Homogenic, but after that, it does get a little bit scary, shall we say.
Yeah.
Scary. I kind of go with regal Aquarian huntress pulling a duck face. That's how I describe it. So yeah, that's the album cover. Should we talk about the album for a bit?
Yeah, okay. I haven't had too much time to listen to it, seeing as it only came out yesterday as of the time of recording. But it strikes me that it's very much like Vespertine. Well, I say very much, it's still very original material on it.
Yeah.
But as far as other Björk releases go, it sounds most like Vespertine, which happens to be my favourite Björk album. So instant tick.
Yeah,
right there.
I think so. That's because Vespertine is her most calm and low-key album, and this album, Utopia, is definitely her most freeform and aleatoric album to date, in my opinion. And I'm quite surprised and quite pleased that despite being quite late in her career, she's 52 years old, she's making some quite bold moves with her music. There are a lot of new sounds that she hasn't explored before in here, a lot of electronically manipulated bird sounds alongside just natural sounds of nature being woven into glitchtronica and flutes. One very positive thing I have to say about this album is that it definitely crafts its own unique soundscape.
I can't deny that. It doesn't sound like anything else I've heard for a very long time. And like you say, the instrumentation on it is so incredibly sparse.
Yeah.
It's like sitting in an empty room or being in the middle of the countryside with nothing around you. I think that the compositions on it are lush for sure. There are a lot of very enjoyable moments on it. I think my problem with the album lies in Björk's vocals, personally. I will put a full disclaimer right now. I'm not as big a fan of Björk's vocal style as I think other people are, but here especially with such sparsity in the instrumentation, you need something to really sort of ground the song to keep the listener engaged, and that would be her vocal melodies on this, which I just think are really flat.
I agree some of the time. I think there are some songs where her vocals are mixed quite loudly. I think on The Gate in particular, I felt, like her vocals are very striking anyway, and when they're mixed just that little bit too loudly, it does sometimes drown out some of the instrumentation, which I think is a bit of a shame, because one of the appeals of this album, I think, is that it does offer so much headspace when you're listening to it. It's almost ambient in its approach to how it guides you through the expanse that it is. So I think I do agree with you on that one.
Well, I don't think it's so much a problem with the vocal, the volume mixing of her vocals. I think that the melodies that she provides, they're just a bit dull. They really don't vary as much as I'd like them to. For example, on the song "Blissing Me," it's the same sort of 8-note melody repeated for pretty much the entire song, which is a real shame. Also, she does this. She started doing this thing where she rolls her R's on every single possible opportunity, and it's cool for a little bit, and then towards the latter half of the album, it gets a bit sick.
I love rolling R's.
I don't like it when it's used that much.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. And I do kind of agree on some of the tracks with the vocal melody bit, because one of my least favourite tracks was Sue Me. I just found the vocal hook, and I say this as a fan of Björk, who embraces pretty much all of her quirks and all of her charms, that I just don't feel the hook on that one, where she just sings Sue Me, just gradually rising, doesn't do anything for me.
I feel like you should say something now, Adam, even though you haven't listened to the album.
Well, so it's interesting that you talk about how that this is very different to her previous albums as she gets older, because I feel like that's something that I see a lot of artists do. Is as they move on towards the end of their careers, they feel like they want to try something new, and I think people have a much higher propensity towards changing up their style for an album or two to see where they can push those boundaries as they move onwards in age.
Okay, I will clarify my point before. I do think some artists do try. I do think a lot of artists stagnate when they get to about that age, but a lot of artists do try something new and completely fail, which is where I think Björk differs, because even though this album isn't perfect, I think she does new sounds quite well on quite a lot of the tracks. So, yeah.
Well, comparing it back to Vespertine, which is my favourite Björk album, I do love both of them because of the ambience of them, and I think it's quite therapeutic to listen to both of them. But I do think that Vespertine is a lot more interesting and enthralling than Utopia is. I feel like there were a lot of subtle elements on Vespertine which just aren't particularly present here. Like I said, I've only had 24 hours to listen to the album, but I have listened to it 5 times since then, trying to focus each time more on the things I might be missing and just not really finding them.
Yeah, I think with Utopia, it does seem to follow very directly on from Vulnicura, which was a breakup album, and that kind of...
She's described this as her Tinder album.
Yeah, I think that was jokingly, but on a few of the songs that does become a little bit present, like on Courtship. And I think I'll just go over one of my problems with the album, because I really enjoy this album up to about the third quarter, where I think it kind of goes a bit off, because it seems to me the first half of this album is very much focused on getting away from everything and self-healing. And then you've got songs towards the end like Sue Me and Tabula Rasa, which to me, a lot of the lyrics are filled with spite for her previous husband, which to me kind of undermines the whole aura of the album that it's trying to give us in the first half. That's something I got out of that.
I can pop in now and say that I sort of agree with you on those songs, except that I think Tabula Rasa has one of my favourite set of lyrics on the album on it, which is sort of a line about parenthood, where she says, "I hope to give you the least amount of baggage. You got the right to make your own fresh mistakes," which is something that I've thought about. I'd feel horrible if I had a child and then brought them into a world of suffering.
Yeah.
It's brought up in another song that I love by a band called Typhoon, Young Fathers, and the whole song sort of pivots around that idea, and I think it's expressed quite beautifully here.
No, I do agree. I think some of the lyrics do go a little bit over my head, but I do think she has a way of weaving in some emotional complexity into her lyrics, and it really comes to the fore towards the end of the album. But I just think that third quarter undermined the things I liked about the first half of the album, and even the last quarter, which I did think brought back the album really nicely.
Well, shall we talk about some best and worst tracks?
Yeah, sure.
You've said your sort of worst tracks, Sue
Yeah,
Me and
yeah.
Tabula Rasa. I think that my least favourites are The Gate and Features Creatures, and both for the same reason, which is sort of to do with my point about her vocals earlier being quite flat, except I think that that sort of applies to the entirety of both of those songs. It's The Gate, for one, is definitely meant to have this sort of hypnotic vibe to it, which I just don't really get.
Yeah. I will say that I actually quite liked Features Creatures. I think that's more so because of in the previous songs, she kind of starts discussing about love less in a literal sense, but more in a metaphorical sense. And the way she goes on in that song, talking about remembering her previous lover from seeing his features in new people. I guess I just quite liked that. I just quite liked that theme, and I thought it worked really well with the eerie backing.
I
Okay.
do think that the album does flow quite well together, track by track, so I do see how you could, experience it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something to experience as a whole, even though it is quite a long album. I think it's 72 minutes. I think if you're not willing to get lost in it, you can get a little bit thrown out by the album. But I think if you do get lost in it, then I think that's the best way to approach this album, definitely. But some favourites from me. I really, really like the opening track, Arisen My Senses.
Same.
I just like it has such a dense sound but it's so intimate at the same time. It's the kind of track that pretty much only Björk can do.
And it has the
Yeah.
best vocal performance on the album,
Oh, definitely.
definitely. I love how incredibly well layered and exciting it is, while at the same time
Yeah.
it doesn't. It still leads you into the rest of the album without throwing you off as to what's to come.
Yeah, yeah. Just another note on the layering. I love how there seems to be different snippets of Björk's vocal melodies coming in and out and above and below each other, and it works really well with the scattered drums throughout the piece. So yeah, brilliant track.
My favourite track on the album is actually the closing track, Future Forever, which I think is possibly the most beautiful track of the year, without exaggeration. I think it works just incredibly well as an outro for the album, summing up the themes of it. And there's got another set of lyrics on it that I absolutely love, which is hold fort forever, forever. Watch me form new nests, weave a matriarchal dome, build a musical scaffolding between sleep and awake, day and night. Oh,
It's beautiful.
those lyrics just make me
Yeah,
melt.
and that's why I like the kind of last quarter. It kind of redeems the third quarter in my mind because it just brings it round to this kind of letting go and moving on that just works really well. And I really like she references the closing track on Homogenic on this song when she
She
says
does, yeah.
trust your head around, and I think that's a really nice allusion as well because that closing on Homogenic, I personally think is fantastic. The way it leaves you completely clear in your head. So I thought that was a really nice touch as well.
Well, the only other song I want to particularly mention is Courtship, which I will say is one of my favourite tracks, even though I don't think it's as good as the other two that I've mentioned, purely because the woodwinds in that track are just sublime.
Yeah. Oh, the woodwinds throughout, I thought I quite liked, just because I think they're generally an underused instrument in pop music. So, yeah,
Is this pop music?
it's not pop music, but
But you wish it was?
I wish it was. Good point. I wish it was. I have two other tracks that I particularly liked. Body Memory, and I've seen people not quite like Body Memory.
Body Memory terrifies me. The weird choir that comes in towards the
Yeah.
end chills me.
But I think that's kind of the point because it's got quite eerie elements to it. You've got some really harsh cello towards the beginning, choral elements like you've said. But I like how the whole song seems to be like an internal struggle processing through Björk's mind. The song doesn't really have a climax or like a low point, but it really kept me interested. The stages of her cognitive development during that song as she goes through this process of discovering a more primal self. I just found it a completely fascinating track. And then also the penultimate track, Saint, I just really liked the flute melodies in that one. So yeah.
Well, before we say our overall thoughts, like scores on the album, I just want to say my big problem, which is you know, like I've said, there are some great lyrics on this album, but because of the way that she has presented some of the songs with her vocal melodies, trying to make a conversation with the backing, I found it quite hard to connect to what she was saying. So it felt less like an experience and more like I'm sort of observing on the sidelines what she's trying to say. I didn't feel like I was getting completely wrapped up in this album, which is a bit of a shame because I've definitely felt that on some of her previous works.
Yeah. I'd say I'd have a different response then, because I do find myself getting lost in this album. Of course, there are things that I don't necessarily relate to in this album, but I, by and large, think she does take me on a journey. That's my closing statement.
Adam, any closing thoughts?
I think that it's not the sort of thing I'd normally listen to, but certainly I would listen to it again.
Yeah, your favourite band's Train, right?
It's been Frank Turner for a few years now.
Okay. Well, I would give this album a light 7.
I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Whether it's a strong or light, I think I'll have to give it a few more listens to see. But overall, I'm quite pleased with it as an entry into the Björk catalogue. So yeah, I'm a happy fan.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it and you're not, killing yourself over Björk making a bad record. Because I was worried about that, Joe.
I was worried about that too, just like the idea that she's gone downhill and that I've hyped it up so much.
I'd like to make a quick detour from talking about new albums, because my friend asked me quite an interesting question the other day. He was trying to think of bands where people have generally thought their second album is better than their first, because he was struggling to think of them, and I started trying to think on this subject, and I decided it's sort of a 50-50 split between some bands will peak with their first album and then go downhill, or peak with their earlier albums and then go downhill, like lots of, like you were saying, bands that started in the 70s and are still releasing music to these days have become quite stagnant. But some other bands, mature with time. So I was just trying to think of examples of each. So the big one was Radiohead, their first album. Ooh. And then they released the Bends.
Yeah, which is so much better. Fantastic album. But then they went even more fantastic after that. So yeah.
But then on the other hand, Frank Turner.
See, I was going to say Train. I certainly think that England Keep My Bones is the second album.
No, it's not.
Is that the third?
No, his first album is Sleep Is For The Weak, and then his second album is Love Iron Song. In fact, England Keep My Bones is his fourth album,
Is
Adam.
that fourth? Wow, so I don't really have an excuse.
Frank Turner falling into that category as well. As far as bands which started off great and got worse, what examples can you think of?
Well, the thing is, I would say King Crimson, because their debut album is their seminal album, In the Court of the Crimson King. But then the stuff they released after that isn't bad at all. In fact,
they released
I think
Red.
Red is pretty much almost as good, at least. And they've also done Lark's Tongues in Aspic and other albums that are really good as well. But their debut album is, I would say, their best. Who else?
Train, I think, fits into this category in that their second album was the one with Drops of Jupiter on it. And basically everything from that point has just become more and more generic pop. But it was the Drops of Jupiter album where they had their own niche and they did it really well, and everything since then has been slightly worse.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of some really good debuts now.
Yeah,
I mean, Grace by Jeff Buckley, but he didn't really.
Yeah, he didn't
that
get
got cut short.
That was a phenomenal album, though. I think we have to include that just because it was amazing.
It's
yeah.
amazing.
We have to imagine that if he had been alive to make a second album, rest in peace. Not trying to disparage your name at all, it probably wouldn't have been as good as Grace.
It's a difficult one to top. I'll say that much.
Was he actually the first person to produce Hallelujah, or was that also a cover there?
It's cover of Leonard Cohen.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Leonard Cohen's first album is his best album.
That is a good point. Leonard Cohen. There we go. We found one. Let's move on. Let's talk about the next album.
Yeah. Another debut album.
Another debut album.
He's done EPs, I think, but this is his first.
Stuff. So, Jaden Smith has a new album out, SYRE. What can I say about Jaden Smith? It's his debut album. Jaden Smith is an actor / rapper. Will Smith's son, memes personified, and his middle name is SYRE. So straight off the bat, you can see how self-indulgent this album is going to be.
Okay.
I went into this album expecting it to be, top tier meme rap, something that I could easily laugh at, and I was sort of surprised in both a good way and a bad way. Surprised because the lyrics on this album are, I'm not going to swear this week, but the word I'm thinking of begins with C, and the production on this album is really, really good.
Yeah, I made a note on that.
It really surprised me by how listenable the album is.
It sounds very
just as
slick.
long as you don't listen to what he's rapping.
Yeah. It's like his production is there. It's all there, but the songwriting, the lyrics are terrible.
Heart is broken. Getting green. Man, I'm artichoking. Man, I'm artichoking. I can't breathe. That's the art of choking. That's an art of choking.
Oh, he's rhyming words with each other. The lyrical genius.
He went on. He found a rhyming dictionary. That's all he did.
The worst
with some
thing
of the
is
songs.
that's a triple entendre if you really look deep into it. But if you get past it to look deep into it, I applaud you because that's the worst I've heard this year for sure.
Okay, should we just go through the funniest lyrics then? Because I've noted a few.
Okay, I like the one where he rhymes Martin Luther King with Kama Sutra-ing.
Ooh. Okay, I'll get to that point a little bit later, but in the song Breakfast, all you hype boys silly, you are square like Piccadilly. And then Falcon, my super flow is so Olympic that I need a medal. I pop out the bushes like hello.
Yeah. I didn't write the line down, but one of them is, I spit that radiation like I'm Chernobyl.
Oh, bloody hell. Oh. And then you've got the song Rapper, where I really think he just got out a rhyming dictionary. You just a mirage. I'm in the garage. I need a massage. Like, yeah.
Please try harder, because there is a lot of potential on this album, I'm not going to lie. The first time I listened to it, without focusing on the lyrics, I was so incredibly impressed with a lot of this album. The second time, I think that Jaden has got so many good ideas. He's just tried so hard to cram all of them into one album without really any glue.
Yeah.
So the production is dope. The beats / instrumentals are far better than I expected they would be, though I think some of the songs are a bit drawn out.
Some are flat, I'd say, but there were some that I actually really enjoyed.
And actually, his sort of bored flow, where he just sounds like he hasn't got really any interest in what he's saying, I think works on this album, especially with the fact that if you pretend that he's not taking his own lyrics seriously, it becomes so much more listenable. But, like I said, the lyrics are trash, and they reek of self-importance and delusion.
Yeah.
Anyone who talks about trying to save hip-hop is just hurting it.
That was my biggest... That's the biggest point of the album that really grated on me. Second track is immediately comparing himself to Martin Luther King and Kendrick Lamar. And I'm not the biggest fan of bragging in general, but when it feels so
Yeah, you don't compare yourself to Kendrick Lamar. No one compares themselves to Kendrick Lamar.
Oh, it just felt so unearned. And just on the second track, he was annoying me. And then, of course, you've got the worst brag track of the year, Icon.
Oh, God.
Oh,
the samples in that alone are enough to make you cringe.
Yeah, it's that just these electronically manipulated...
Did you know that he's got a record label? Because if you don't by the end of that song, then... Yeah. I mean, he just drills it in repeatedly.
Yeah. Well, not just that song, the entire album.
That was one of my least favourite tracks, because 1, annoying samples, 2, needlessly self-indulgent / delusional, and 3, it's made up of... This first verse, which is really short, and the second verse, which is needlessly long and doesn't give you a break, and just repeats the same things over and over again. It's a trial to listen to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, certainly I think that he's tried really hard to make it seem like he's not doing what his dad did, and yet at the same time he's taking all of the...
His dad was 90s top tier meme rap.
Yeah. He's taken all of that money that his dad earned doing that, and he's used it to hire the best people he can to farm his opinions off of the I'm 14 and This Is Deep subreddit.
Yeah.
So...
Oh, Jaden. Well, we've started talking about bad tracks. Let's talk about some more bad tracks.
Yep.
Because I will say that there are a few of them on this album just because of the lyrics. I think Breakfast is a big bad. For a start, the guest feature from A$AP Rocky is completely wasted. Like, very difficult to tell it's there. It's just sort of mumbly in the background. It transitions between its sections really badly. And that bit at the end with the radio announcement about the kids going around blasting their mixtapes, and then there's been a triple homicide from a man named SYRE, is really painful to listen to. And that is the track where he talks about saving rap.
Yeah, that was one of my least favourites.
And it comes after a pretty strong opening, which is really disappointing.
It's something you see in the rap scene quite a lot, I think, is that the people who are genuinely good at it refuse to admit that they're good at it. Like, the only time that Eminem has ever said that he's the greatest rapper of all time was in a satire album. And a lot of people would make the case that he's one of the best. It's the better you are in a lot of things, I think.
Eminem's another one that has a better second album than first, actually.
There we go.
Just ruined our flow about Jaden Smith by saying that. Other ones, Lost Boy, needlessly long, really dull vocal performance.
Okay,
Joe
I liked Lost Boy up until the end, when he did. It was the last 3 minutes. He started doing his shout outs.
Yeah, and then doesn't stop doing his shout outs.
And I'm just like, I don't need to hear your bloody shout outs. I don't care about these.
Just look at the album booklet to find out who you dedicate this album to.
Because I actually quite like the feel of Lost Boy. I think it...
Well, my main problem with it is that it's needlessly long. If you cut out the last 3 minutes, then it turns into a 6-minute track, which, still kind of long, but tolerable.
Yeah, but it had a nice feel. I liked the acoustics, the background vocals were quite haunting. I thought the doubling worked quite well. I liked it, but then it just went on.
Other song just goes on and on and on. Batman.
Oh,
and that's not one of the shorter tracks on the album, but I believe he says Batman well over 90 times on that song.
Yeah, it's I did see, the only note I've got by Batman is, what is the point of this song?
Yeah.
Like, you'd hope that he'd probably draw out some perhaps interesting analogies from a song by that title, but no.
And he starts every single stanza with Batman, 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 Batman. I don't don't fill your time with saying Batman. Just fill your time by saying something that's necessary or important.
Meaningful.
Like na 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 na.
Batman.
Yeah, exactly. See, that would have been a lot more mimetic than the rest of the album, which...
I only have one more track that I would say I didn't like, though, and that's The Passion, just because I felt like it was quite fillery.
Yeah.
Besides that, there are actually quite a few tracks on this album that I like as well. For example, Blue, the opening sort of 4 tracks. I know it's B, then L, then U, then E. I'm just going to call them one track. It's really, really striking.
I liked the first part. I liked B.
Well, the bit that didn't have much Jaden on it.
Yeah, I actually really liked that bit. I liked Willow Smith's performance in that. I think I'm becoming a bit of a fan of hers. And then, as I said before, I got really annoyed by the second track. And then...
I think that it's such an incredibly dramatic opening, and I love the beats. There's so many sort of moments of euphoria on there. And I know this isn't really much praise, but I think overall it does have the best lyrics on the album. Even if he does talk about Martin Luther King and Kama Sutra-ing and artichoking. Yeah. But listening to those first 4 tracks got me really excited about an album which I was sure was going to be terrible. It's just a shame Breakfast followed it.
Yeah, Breakfast, and then Hope, and then 90. Well, neither of those tracks did anything for me.
I really liked 90. I think 90's possibly my favourite on the album. I think that I love the instrumental in it, and the transition between the sections actually works pretty well. And the lyrics are surprisingly good. I mean, they don't mean too much. It's just another song about, oh, I want you back sort of thing, you know. But by Jaden Smith standards, surprisingly good.
It's better.
Even if he does spit radiation like Chernobyl.
It's painful.
It's also one of his better vocal deliveries on the album as well, kind of emotional, works really well. But besides that, okay, let's talk about the running theme of the album, because he's clearly ripped off Kendrick Lamar from To Pimp a Butterfly with this whole sort of snippets throughout the album, and then the end track being a rundown of what he said so far. So it's this sort of, okay, I don't even know what it is because it's meaningless. He talks about this character called SYRE, who is supposed to be himself. He does snippets throughout the album where he talks about a beautiful confusion and she loved him, but then she killed him, and it makes no sense. But actually, at the end of the album, I can just about accept it being tacked on at the end if you ignore the fact that he's been talking about it at all previously, because I believe you can forgive people for indulging in their own, you know, pretentious ideals at times.
Yeah.
And on this track, I mean, yes, it's delusional, meaningless, and kind of hilarious, but it's kind of endearing that he thinks so much of himself so young. And when he puts it on such a lush backing.
That's what I'd say. I think SYRE is my favourite track at the end, just because the backing is really
gorgeous.
Nice. It's really
absolutely
nice.
Gorgeous. And when he describes himself as a beautiful confusion, I kind of agree with him. I get what he's saying.
Yeah, he is that.
Yeah. A beautiful confusion.
How beautiful it is up to debate, I think, but definitely a confusion. I have one other track that I actually quite liked the guitar riff in Watch Me.
Yeah, I know Watch Me is ripped off from Kanye West, Black Skinhead, but I don't care. The song bangs.
Yeah, it's definitely the most listenable track, I think, on the album, just, going full throttle. But honestly, overall, I was disappointed that it wasn't more humorous, personally.
I think that it's got a lot of potential for the future, but I would have much preferred him to just get all of his tweets and just arrange them into lyrics.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And made it completely meaningless, than attempt to go for this, I'm going to say it again, delusional, like self-indulgent fantasy.
Because the biggest problem I found was that so many of the lyrics were meaningless. He kind of goes on very, very standard topics, standard hip-hop topics, without ever really being clear or concise or particularly interesting with the way he talks about them, unless he is putting a rather random, obscure metaphor in there, which, you know, does spice up the album a little bit. But overall, I felt like this album doesn't really have a message. It doesn't really make me laugh. And if it just did one or the other and he really focused on that, then, you know, he could come up with something good, but I just don't think that happened on this album.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we should wrap this review up now by... okay, I'm going to say that this album is far, far and away better than I thought it was going to be, but I'm also really disappointed that the potential that is apparent on this album was not matched, so, you know, strong 4/5 from me.
Yeah, I was more disappointed than anything else. I mean, it's not terrible, it does have good things about it, so I'm giving it a 4.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think that certainly the production quality was incredibly high, but just Jaden Smith himself let it down. So 3.5 maybe.
Oh, harsh.
Very harsh. I will say that I've listened to this album more over the past 2 weeks than I care to admit, because I actually enjoy listening to it quite a bit, just as long as I ignore the terrible lyricism.
You monster.
All right, Adam. You can get off our show now. Let's move on to... Oh, God. You know, we were talking about delusions of grandeur and self-indulgence and just generally being a huge twat. Let's talk about Morrissey.
Do we have to?
No, we don't have to. Let's not talk about Morrissey. The album sucks. Let's move on.
Okay.
Let's talk about Frank Turner. No, we do have to talk about Morrissey. Otherwise, those hours of having to listen to his new album will have been wasted. Joe, do you want to introduce this guy? Or...
I have not been looking forward to this review.
in my notes describing him, I've used the C word twice. I've used the T word. He's like the complete opposite of Jaden Smith, but also pretty much the same person. Just a lot less endearing, I think.
Doesn't have the excuse that he's young and stupid. He's just
No,
old and stupid
he's
instead.
old and stupid. And I mean, the second that he defended the Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey cases, saying, so just the comments he made, I won't repeat them, but if you look them up, you'll understand why I wasn't looking forward to listening to this album, because Morrissey's one of those people who it's very difficult to separate his identity and his politics from his music.
Well, this is a very politically charged album, so
Yeah.
that's not going to happen during this review. So this is why this album frustrates me, because like as a music commentator, I think I should separate my own personal views and feelings about his, what his positions are, and focus more on how effectively he's putting his position across.
But that's where my problem is, because his personality is so incredibly latched on to the music he produces, it's impossible to separate the two.
Okay, well for me, it
Because
was...
I did try your approach and just couldn't.
Well, that's why I found it so frustrating, because on the couple of songs where I would say that I'm more sympathetic towards his point of view, he puts it across so poorly that I just have my head in my hand. And on the two tracks where I think he puts his point of view across well, I don't like the message. So for me, this album was just a headache to listen to.
Yeah.
So
and the worst thing is that the compositions themselves, while not incredible, are kind of, they're sonically pleasing. They're not terrible at all.
You think?
I don't think they're, they're not as good as some of the other things we've listened to recently. But, the production's fine. There isn't anything that's, hugely offensive.
Okay, the production's fine, but I have a problem with there's nothing hugely offensive in the composition, because I found it incredibly trite. Specifically his vocal melodies.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just separating anything that Morrissey has inputted to this from the rest of the music. So that includes.
Okay, fair enough.
If you take his voice out, there's nothing offensive.
Okay, I would say it's perhaps the compositions are a little uninteresting.
Yeah, but like
they're not
making me want
give
to
give the devil his due, shall we say? But well, then I'll just talk about his vocal melodies. I thought
they're so bad.
They're so bad. Okay, let me see. Home is a question mark. Despite that being one of the two tracks I think he puts his message across effectively, has the most obnoxiously croony hook in the chorus that I just no, don't want to listen to it. And then when you open your legs, I was pretty much cringing throughout all of that song. What else? Oh, I Wish You Lonely. Couldn't. No,
Well,
don't like listening to him sing on any of those tracks.
Say I Wish You Lonely and Jackie's Only Happy When She's Up on the Stage are, if I have to say highlights, they're my highlights, and that's mostly because the messages he gets across in them are ones that don't make me want to punch him in the face, because of how... I mean, this album's really mean-spirited, I think. The worst offender being I Bury the Living. That song is a strong contender for my least favourite of the year.
But that's the other track that I thought he put his message across effectively. Perhaps that's a bad thing if you don't like his message, but...
I don't think... But that's the thing, like, I don't think he gets it across well. I just completely disagree with you on that.
I think some of the most striking lyrics were that on song. Give me an order and I'll blow up a border. Give me an order and I'll blow up your daughter.
See, I personally think that's really weak. That was an example I was going to give of the complete opposite.
Okay. And then, I thought it was strong. And then the repetition at the end of I'm on a mad cannon fodder, that did, it made me feel something, even if I don't like his portrayal of a soldier in the song at all.
I just think he's an evil man. I do not like the way that he's...
I don't like using the term evil so freely.
No,
but
I think he's just so mean on the album, on the song. There's no nuance to what he's saying, which sometimes can be fine.
True.
But it's... I mean, there's lots of punk music that revolves around a lack of nuance, as we've discussed previously, in albums you haven't liked, but...
And it's a big part of why I don't like a lot of the lyrics and points of views on this album. Like, a lot of the times, he doesn't even make any meaningful points. It's just describing what's happening. He's barely giving a strong point of view at all. Which, I think, if you're going to make a politically charged album, you should at least come at it with an argument. But I feel in so many tracks there isn't actually, like, an argument being made. So...
Yeah. There's one track, which is another one of my sort of worst tracks, which is Spent the Day in Bed. And it's just because of how clunkily he combines the two sort of elements, because you've got the verses where he's singing about, I spent the day in bed, I like my bed. And then the chorus where he goes, so stop watching the news, sheep. Whoa!
Yeah. And that comes across on some of the other songs as well. He tries to mix, like, political verses with choruses about love. Like the opening track, My Love, I'd Do Anything For You, and then another track later on, All the Young People Must Fall in Love. Can I just say, some of the track titles, I know it's a bit characteristic of him, but I just find them a bit obnoxious.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's a good thing because it reflects the album. But yeah, that's just another point I wanted to make.
Adam, any thoughts on Morrissey?
I just felt like I just felt like the album in itself was just inherently dishonest. Specifically on the point that Joe was just making about how he mixes these verses. It feels like he's trying to conflate two things which just don't have to be related and force you to associate those in your head. And it just feels dishonest in a way that felt underhanded to me.
Yeah.
It does feel very off.
Yeah.
Very off.
And, like, there's a weird combination of these attemptedly political lyrics and then these overtly sexual ones as well.
Oh, that just made me cringe.
Like, the songs, face in your lap, and he sings about, I want your legs around my face, and it's just like, how did we get here?
It's so, well, I did note down, like, it sounds so juvenile.
Yeah.
What adult would put, how old is he? Like, well, I don't know how old he is. I'm assuming he's about 50 or, like, around that age? Okay.
Alex is here.
I hate Morrissey.
Yeah.
So,
it's weird because in our very first podcast we talked about The Queen is Dead by the Smiths, and we both,
we
quite
liked the
liked
album.
it. And I think that's might be because Morrissey's a bit more restrained there by the fact that he's working with other people rather than he's got free reign all by himself. I know he's the main lyricist, but still. But there was just nothing there which was as horrible as here. I mean, Morrissey has always come across as a sort of firm believer of love, but here his way of expressing it is these weirdly sexual lyrics twinned with just such mean political commentary.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't come across.
It feels to me like he's daring his fans to give up on him, and I hope they do.
Yeah.
I don't have much more to say on this album. I just really.
I've kind of said everything I want to say. I don't know whether I want to talk about Who Will Protect Us from the Police, whether I want to put myself through, because that's a song where I do kind of agree with the messages behind it being quite critical of course, police brutality and also what's been going on in Venezuela with the authoritarian socialist government. But again, it's just another track where the argument isn't there. He just describes things. I mean, suppose maybe he's trying to let his listener work it all out for him, but I don't know, it left me just feeling like he didn't really make a statement, which I think is, the point of an album like this is to make a statement. So, yeah.
I still think the worst thing about this album is I can't give it as low a score as some things, just because I think that without his vocal performance, the album could be a lot better. Like, some of the compositional elements on it I think are really nicely arranged, and not the most original or interesting. There's quite a lot of variety on the album, and it flows fairly well. It's just his presence ruins everything.
Yeah, I think I'm less positive towards the instrumentation in general. than you, but
I think I'm harsher on the lyrics and the performance, so I think it evens out.
Yeah, I think it evens out. Like, I'll give the devil his due when he puts his point of view across well, but other than that, I really don't have anything else positive to say about the album. I think we need to wrap this up because everyone's getting very depressed.
Light 3.
I give it strong 2 to a light 3.
Yeah, I can't deviate much from that too.
Yeah.
It's... I want this album to go away.
Yeah, I'm going to put Morrissey in the F sharp A sharp Revisited Gulag for being the music industry equivalent of Piers Morgan. So...
well, let's talk about one final full album, and this is when we discussed what we were going to do on this podcast. Adam burst into the room and demanded that he be allowed to talk about this artist. So I'll let you introduce him.
Sure. Frank Turner is someone who we've been waiting for some new content out of him for a long, long time, and he spectacularly failed to deliver here.
Okay, straight in. So yeah, his last album came out in 2015.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
And it was arguably his worst album.
I think that's fair.
So I was kind of hoping for... I mean, fair enough on him. He wants to do something different each time, and releasing an album, his last one being Positive Songs for Negative People, full of songs which are, supposedly positive songs for negative people. I'm not sure he succeeded all the way through on that.
Was that...
attempt. But
I feel like there was... That's the one with Balthazar Impresario,
No.
and that's more recent than Balthazar Impresario is.
Balthazar Impresario was on England Keep My Bones. He's had 2 albums since then.
Was that wasn't on England Keep My Bones?
Are you sure you're a Frank Turner fan, Adam?
I'm so confused right now.
Since 2015, he's done a lot of touring. He always does a lot of touring. I think he's done about 2,000 shows now, which is insane.
Oh, impressive.
Yeah. I've been quite a big fan of Frank Turner for a while. Not so fond of his more recent work. And this album I thought was going to be new material. It's not. It's a compilation album with one new song on. And personally, that new song...
Yeah.
It's I mean, Frank Turner is always at his best when he has something to say, as something that he wants to talk about, something that he can craft his lyricism around. And here it's just a love song with no deeper meanings. It's dull.
See, yeah, but I feel like the album itself actually has a significant message behind it, although it's not overtly obvious. In that. It's split up into 2 distinct sections. You've got the re-released songs as they were, which was, he said, some of his favourite tracks, plus the new song, and then the remakes.
Yeah.
And I feel like those re-release songs in particular, he uses as a statement to try and signal where he's going, because there's some key notable absences in there that you would expect to make it onto list of favourite tracks. Mm. Conspicuous by their absences are anything which is to do with like the Amy trilogy or any sort of depressing points of his music or anything political at all. There's nothing political in his album whatsoever.
Like my favourite track by him, second favourite track by him, Love Iron Song from the album Love Iron Song isn't on here, and I think that's possibly his most overtly political song, in which he makes good points. I mean, Morrissey, learn.
I mean, Thatcher the Kids is probably more so. But I think that as a whole, the album sort of makes sense, although it definitely has its low points.
Okay, well, Joe, you're not so much of a huge fan of Frank Turner. I believe you said you'd listened to England Keep My Bones once.
I'd listened to Love Iron Song, the album, through once. I would describe Frank Turner as an artist. I appreciate the good qualities in his songwriting, but his songwriting style doesn't necessarily resonate with me.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's that.
Well, there aren't many songs from Love Iron Song on here, sadly. I was hoping for a bit more, variety, but most of the tracks come from his last 2 albums. which, they're fresh. We don't need reminding of them so much, I don't think.
Which I think ties into the message. A lot of his early work was influenced by, was very much depressing when you look at it objectively. It was both depressing and political. And his most recent 2 albums have been about moving forward and getting better. That's even the title of one of the songs. And I think he really wanted to double down on that here. It's evident in the new song "There She Is" that he's not dwelling on the parts of his life that influenced him to make those previous albums, and he's trying to move forward again with the remakes as well. It all sort of comes together.
Fair enough. Well, shall we talk about the remakes for a bit of his previous songs, because they're new, so they can be talked about. For a start, the choices of songs that he's done remakes of are mostly songs that I didn't feel particularly needed them. There are a few songs that I think worked really well, remade. Polaroid Picture for one. I'm not actually a fan of the original. I think that the sort of stripped down interpretation is actually probably more interesting than the original.
I've got the same thing written down here. Yeah,
And also, I think I Am Disappeared is interesting, stripped down. The vocal harmonies are a nice surprise, and it's sort of more piano driven than the original, but then the last couple of minutes are just a lesser version of the original with pretty much the same instrumentation, which is a shame. And then on songs like Photosynthesis, it's pretty much the same song, except he's replaced the violin solo with a guitar solo, which is a lot less interesting. So I wasn't hugely impressed by any of I wasn't hugely impressed by most of the redone tracks. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, I felt like he was trying to challenge himself. In many of these songs in particular, when you look at the originals, there's a dissonance between the lyrics and the actual tone of the song and the style of the music that he's putting to those lyrics. And I think he's gone out of his way to try and fix that in several of those here. Maybe as a challenge to himself, or maybe just because he doesn't like the way those turned out.
Perhaps, yeah.
Can I just say, though, as someone who's quite fresh to a lot of these songs, the songs in the reworked Songbook section that I'd heard before, I actually preferred his vocal performances on the previous...
I think that's generally because... Wait, you prefer them on the previous?
Yeah, not the song, but specifically Photosynthesis, the original vocal performance was so much better, I thought, than the Songbook version.
Yeah, I do think that's something I agree with, and I'm not entirely sure why. You'd think someone with time would improve, but here it just... Well, I guess if he's doing this just for the sake of trying to challenge himself, then there's not as much reason for him to put the heart into it as he's done before with the songs, so...
Well, that's just it. I liked quite raw vocal performances of when he did it originally, but with this one, it just felt that little bit tamer, so it didn't quite grab me quite as much.
I'm disappointed by this. I was really hoping for a new Frank Turner album with new tracks.
I absolutely was. Noticeable also by its absence, because he's left out anything political, is a song that he performed live about a year ago called The Sand in the Gears, which I highly recommend anyone looking up on YouTube, because it's really, really well done, but it's been specifically left out here because it's very political.
I don't feel like I've got much else to say about the album. I'm just disappointed. Partly because he's left out. I mean, for a start, I Am Disappeared, I think, is one of his best songs, and he's included it in the rework section, but not in the actual brunt of the album.
It's the only Amy trilogy song which appears here, and it's specifically in the remade section, which, if I were a psychoanalyst, I would psychoanalyze the shit out of that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm disappointed. Let's move on.
Do you want to talk about, actually, There She Is specifically?
Yeah, okay. The instrumental's dull, his vocal performance is dull, the lyrics are a bit meaningless, and I mean, fair enough to him if he wanted to do something different, but I don't think this song needed to be released.
Yeah, I felt like it. I felt like there was just too much going on. It was like a cacophony of sounds. I just couldn't get my head around it all. The acoustic version is significantly better because it does what Frank does best, which is cut straight to the emotional message that he's trying to convey. But the song itself, there's just too much going on in terms of instrumentals, I think, to put that across.
Yeah, it's another one where there isn't any nuance as well. There isn't any subtlety to his lyrics or the composition. It's really disappointing. I'm going to go after this and listen to Love Iron Song all the way through to make myself feel better.
What was your least favourite song from the album?
From this album?
Yeah.
I don't like that he included Polaroid Picture on it. I really don't understand the fuss about that song. I think it's another one which is just boring and the message isn't that great. Mittens as well. I do like the central, we fit like mittens, we didn't fit like gloves. That's nice, but you can't write a whole song around 2 lines and expect it to work.
Yeah. I think that Love 40 Down was the most disappointing for me here.
On the reworks.
Yeah.
Because I really like the original.
Exactly. Well, the original, certainly, I didn't think it was the best he's ever done, but it nailed it just right. And then the rework, in a lot of the other, so like Polaroid Picture, for example, did its job much better, whereas Love 40 Down was just significantly worse.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to give this a score because, it's a compilation album. I've heard most of the songs before. I'll just say I'm disappointed.
What I will say is that I enjoyed the first 2/3 that weren't the reworks. I actually quite enjoyed that, listening through that. As
Well, those are the best tracks in the reworks.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my notes and I've put stars next to the ones that I think are good and sort of dashes next to the one that I don't think are good. And the first 6 songs all get stars.
Mm-hmm.
As well as I Knew Proof Rock Before He Got Famous gets 2 stars because that's my favourite song by him.
But yeah, I think, just because I'm fresh, nearly fresh going into this album, is just that I think it does serve as a good introduction. As far as compilation albums go, I think it's more towards someone like me that it would be targeted towards, rather than, hardcore fans.
I suppose that is the point of compilation albums.
So I think it works. The flow isn't bad. I don't think it's bad. It works well. I think I did enjoy myself going through at least, the first part of the album. So I think it's a good compilation album, but the songbook section where he reworks the songs, I just don't think is
he
as
could
good.
have left that out.
Yeah.
I like Frank Turner, so I'll happily listen to anything he puts out. But let's say that thing I say just about every podcast. I'd rather go back and listen to his previous stuff. That's the section of album reviews done.
Yes.
We've got a few shout-outs of albums. Joe, for once, isn't the one who's been listening to all the albums this week. It's been me.
I have been very, very lazy, stressed and busy, so that kind of took up a lot of my time. So.
I've been ill and off work, so I've had a chance to listen to some stuff. First of all, the new album by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, which is the best band name.
I love that band name so much.
And their new album, which I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of, Polygonwanaland.
Yes.
Which I thought was a pretty great album, pretty inventive, surprisingly fun throughout. You listened to the first track of that.
Well, I got halfway through and decided it wasn't doing anything for me, so maybe I do need to actually give it a proper listen.
I've only listened to Nonagon Infinity by them before, which I think is a great album.
Oh, it is great, yeah.
But I was surprised by this, much better than I thought it was, and quite different to Nonagon Infinity, which is cool. Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds new album, Who Built the Moon, is wading into conspiracy theorist territory here.
See, this is what I'd expect from Jaden Smith.
I'm surprised there weren't any lyrics on the album about the moon being a hoax, and it's actually a giant, satellite in the sky or something, put up there by Ronald Reagan or something. I don't know. He seems like that sort of guy. Anyway.
It was a prime opportunity to put forward the moon truthers ideology. You just completely missed that chance.
Yeah, I didn't know where I was going with that point. Anyway, Who Built the Moon's good. I'm surprised. I mean, I've always known Noel Gallagher is better than Liam Gallagher, but there's a good amount of variety on the new album and some really nifty tracks. Enjoyed listening to it, even though I don't think the songwriting was always great. It's, the variety really pulled me through. And then we had the new album by Ghost Atlas, which is called All in Sync and There's Nothing Left to Sing About. And that was bad. Really repetitive, lacks variety. The solos sucked.
I was surprised by that. I thought you were going to say you loved it.
No.
I've seen some positive reception to that.
Yeah, same. I was really
album,
disappointed. I just found that the solos completely relied on tapping throughout, and they always popped up during the verses as well when you didn't really want them to be there. And, they're fast, but that doesn't mean they're exciting. That's it. Those are my thoughts for the day. I'm done.
Oh, we're done.
Should we do the duck analogy again?
Yes, you love it so much,
I
don't you?
do like the duck analogy. So,
Okay.
Adam's new. Let's explain the duck analogy to
Okay,
him.
so at the end of the podcast, we do a bit of a roundup and we decide, are we going to, if these artists or musicians were ducks, are we going to throw them some bread, are we going to pat them on the head, or are we going to shoot them?
Are we judging all of the artists as a group?
No, just one at a time. So
One at a time,
we
so
start off with Björk.
Björk, so I'm definitely giving her a pat on the head because I do think she needs one, and then some bread as well, wholemeal seeded.
I would agree, but I would give her just a few crumbs rather than a good slice of bread.
Well, I do love Björk, so
I know. Adam,
Yeah, Björk can have a pat on the head.
pat on the head. Okay, and let's move on to Jaden Smith.
Jaden Smith, I feel like I'm going to have to fire some warning shots. He needs to get good.
Yeah,
He needs-
better.
He needs to get good.
Swim faster.
Swim fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd make a good album.
Or swim faster.
Yeah.
Is this an album title or a concept?
It's a concept, and he uses electronically manipulated sounds of him swimming progressively faster.
I'm not going to
You
lie,
heard it
Joe,
here
that
first.
sounds awful. Morrissey,
Well, he's
Gulag.
going in the gulag.
So he's going to be shot anyway. Adam,
Yeah,
shooting.
yeah, I'm down with that.
Well, it's not quite a clean shooting. It means we monitor him, and he will meet his end. Yeah, he's being monitored. We might even, give him a treat to give him a false sense of security. This is my
if
evil
you
genius
want-
coming out.
If
too much.
Morrissey is the actual being, and then his music, the compositions of the feathers, I'm going to take the feathers and make them into a nice pillow, and then I'm going to stab the actual duck repeatedly.
Okay, it's a bit violent.
I don't like him.
Nick definitely has an evil side within him. But yeah, here's for the gulag. He's with Katy Perry, with Taylor Swift. Who else have we put in there? Brandon Flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we put Brandon Flowers in there?
I think we did.
I do think that
He's
he could
halfway
do a
in
lot better.
there. He's halfway in there. So and then
Frank Turner,
Frank Turner.
he's just sort of floating on the river, letting the current take him along. I think at the moment. I think one warning shot to get him to kick his legs.
see, I think I'll go a bit more positive. I'll coax him with some bread to give us some good stuff. I think.
I give him a pat on the head. I don't think he's produced something good enough to earn some bread, but he clearly tried very hard. So it's a pat on the head.
Well, that's the end of the podcast. Adam, go away.
All right,
Bye.
bye.
Well, we'll hopefully have more guests in the future.
Yeah, it's nice to spice things up a little bit.
Right, so it's time to do some plugs.
I actually have a different podcast I want to plug, Song Exploder, which I really like. I really like listening to, hosted by Rihike Shuei, who interviews actual music artists and gets them to discuss how they wrote their songs. And he's interviewed Fleet Foxes and Michelle Branch, who we've talked about on the podcast, and I think they're really interesting. So that's something I wanted to plug.
Okay, I will do the usual plug of Stacey. Stacey, who is Joe's friend, who has a podcast called Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour, and like 3 others
Yeah.
as well. I'm sure you'll find it quite quickly. She's been nominated for an award recently.
Yeah, Best Actress for the Audioverse Awards. She did Reagan and Starburst, which was a audio drama, and she played a Doolally librarian, so I voted for her.
Where was your nomination for Best Actor for the homicidal Halloween maniac?
I think that's the proudest moment of my life. The evil genius laugh at the end. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Let's plug Charlie Alcock and James Gardner, our friends, who have a comedy sort of YouTube thingy called Alcock Gardner. They've got 2 episodes out. There'll be a 3rd one soon, I'm sure. And it's cool.
It's fun comedy.
But I mean, when you're searching for it, don't accidentally type in all cock because you'll arrive somewhere completely different.
Yeah, you don't want to end up there.
No. And finally, ourselves. you can find it. This is something I've been thinking recently because our podcast name is F Sharp A Sharp Revisited. Are people typing in the word sharp or putting a hash? Maybe we should rename our podcast. Adam, what should we call it?
F minor A minor Revisited.
Cool. Right. From now on, we're called F minor A minor Revisited. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Podbean, all by searching F minor A minor Revisited.
And you will find us. And it's a much more depressing version of the podcast, I have to say.
Much, much more. But for now, I've been Nick.
I've been Joe.
And I've been Adam.
And you've been listening to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited. Bye.
Goodbye.
F Sharp A Sharp Revisited.